Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Um, Today we have with us Romana and Gayatri. Thank you so much, Romana and Gayatri, for joining us today. Romana leads program design and implementation at Kizazi. Part of what Kizazi does is that it supports local education leaders design and implement breakthrough school models appropriate to local needs. They use a lot of evidence-based approach, and I've worked with them, and they've just been really instrumental in helping SEF anchor everything on research, all our interventions. Previously, Romana was a director of training and impact for Teach for India, where she led design and delivery of instructional and personal leadership for students, teachers, and programs across 7 cities. Yeah. She's also currently training to be a psychotherapist. We also have Gayatri with us. She has been deeply engaged in education sector for 15 years. Currently, she is director of programs at 321 Education Foundation. She oversees development of teacher training programs, as well as programs targeting numeracy and literacy challenges in budget private schools in India. So thank you so much, Romana, Gayatri, for joining us. Yeah, I'm excited for today's conversation. I also welcome the viewers. I'm aware that the viewers are a group of teachers, practitioners, people working in education organizations in the country. Very excited to really get to what, why, and how research in schools and education nonprofits in this panel today. Just before we begin, I just wanted to set the tone by telling you all that over the past few days, I had a few conversations and calls with some colleagues and people who work in schools as well as education organizations, right? And I asked them, okay, what is this with regards to our research in schools and education nonprofits today? You know, as we're addressing this topic today, I wanted to know what the purpose of research is to them. And this is what I asked them. And I think a lot of the responses were, yes, it definitely informs practice, but there are these issues of time, this misconception, this idea that it is time consuming, and there is a skill that maybe I'm not really confident about. And so hence, let me not call this research. I've done this work. I've found evidence behind an amazing practice, but I don't want to call it research just yet because, you know, I haven't had that experience. You know, I think there's this idea around research that a lot of people want clarity on. And I think we want that today as we talk about it along the way. Because I think a lot of what we want to do today is that we want to inform our viewers why research is important in our practice in schools as well as education organizations. So with that, I want to start us off by just, as we start this talk, I just wanted to ask both Gayatri and Romana, anyone, if you can take the lead, what constitutes research in school and ed profits? Let's start with that.
Can get us started, Romana, right? So there are many definitions. You Google and you'll find a lot of interesting definitions, right? But there's a very simple definition that I read once and it has stayed in my head is research is an organized and systematic method of finding answers to questions. Yeah. Now that could be a hypothesis that you have and you want to figure out whether it's true or not. It's a problem that you're grappling with, but the key words are being organized and being systematic. Now, Interly just sort of segueing into what you started off with. Yeah, many of us, what do we think the moment the word research comes to mind, right? For many, many years for me, it was, okay, large, big, research institutions. Yeah, you don't think anything less than Tata Institute of Social Sciences or so on and so forth, right? Or specialized functions or teams in an organization. You call it as a research department, research and development teams. Or we also talk about, you know, formally vetted, peer evaluated papers that get published in all of these journals that we sort of read. They are all what constitute research. But what also constitutes research, and something that many of us tend to downplay continuously, is a teacher doing something like this in her classroom. Now imagine a teacher has some ideas on reducing noise levels in her class. Now she thinks, if I do these two actions, my hypothesis is it'll help. Now, one could do something in an unsystematic manner, but there is this teacher who says, okay, action A, she does it for a month. She takes systematic notes, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and the notes could be qualitative, they could be quantitative, a mix of both. Yeah, she does then action B, tries it out for another month. And after 3 months, studies them and comes to a conclusion as to which action of hers will help deal with noise levels. What she has done is action research. Now, there are many people and many of us in civil society organizations who do this intuitively, or who do this because we must do this because we're trying to figure out how on earth to solve a problem, but we shy away from calling it as research, or we shy away from publishing it. And there are many other parts which we can come to later on, or we just do it in bits and parts and we are not systematic enough about it. We are not systematic about documenting this, right? And documentation and an organized systematic documentation becomes key. So for me, all of this is what is research. And now I can just say, Romana, you could just sort of take it off from here.
That was great, Gayatri. I have nothing really to add. You used the very same words and a very similar example that I had in mind, and I think it really covers everything. So listening to that, it makes me let's just reiterate the purpose of the kind of research we're talking about right now is really continuous learning and accelerating learning. No, I think when a teacher does that, and then when 5 teachers do that, and then those 5 teachers share it, every teacher may not have to ask that same question of how do I reduce noise levels. But if I'm asking how do I reduce noise levels, grade 4 is asking how do I settle down after lunch break. Grade 5 is asking how do I keep all my kids engaged when they have 5 different things on their mind. And every teacher is doing what Gayatri said, and they come together and share that. That's just accelerated learning for that school. What each teacher would have taken months to do, now that school is doing collaboratively in half the amount of time. And I think that really underscores the value of action research, the value of combining that individual teachers' research with the school's research, and then going higher and higher to the larger district level research or the larger organization research. So I just thought I'd play that on what Gayatri said to say there's all of those different levels of research, and they all really feed into each other to get us to answer the big questions around education.
Yeah, and just to build on that, imagine, Romani, if now this is one school. Now, if it's published, if thousands and lakhs of schools need not reinvent the same wheel. Yeah, they see that there is evidence to an action. Yeah, and then you choose whether I want to go with it or not. But you don't have to keep regenerating the evidence for the same actions across a lakh schools. And imagine if this were available to teachers, available to institutions, yeah, which is very easy to access, what it might do to the entire teaching learning community.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Romana and Gayatri. I think when you ended with the need to just share that evidence as well, Gayatri. And I think there, like I said earlier, that there is this, while you both encourage the need to just not have such maybe, for lack of a better word, fear again, towards like needing to have such structured academic, maybe their reference to research was mostly, say, what they experienced in college in one of their research assignments. And hence the task was, the process was quite a task, and quite, it was a little too much for them to be interested in doing that in their daily work right now. Whereas actually, I think what you guys did was you confronted that in saying that, whereas actually in practice, we are engaging in research in our day-to-day engagement with schools and teachers. And what we just need to do is, we just need to do, what we need to do is we need to have like the systematic note taking. We need to have this basic question, and basic question, like you said, is just how can I reduce noise? And so my question to you is, why do you think, when I find this information about my classroom, why do you think teachers should have the, I think my question is more of how do you think they can confront their, okay, let me just put this way. Imagine a teacher, right? I'm coming to you and being like, this is something that a lot of my government primary schools are struggling with, right? And I've done this practice. I want to be able to share it, but I just don't know how. What would you say to that person? She's not sure about how do I do this? How do I write? How do I share? Just that insecurity, for instance, right? A teacher comes to you and shares that with you. How would you respond to them? What would you tell them? Yeah, Romana, do you want to go and take this?
Sure. I think it's an example that is very close to my experience both at Teach for India as well as at Kizazi now, where our role really, my role in Teach for India as well as here was a few levels away from being in a classroom directly. So the case you presented, Ini, was one that till today comes up often. Where I'm not necessarily the one doing that research, but a teacher is saying, hey, I figured this out. You know, it worked for me in my class. Now, what do I do with it? I think the first step which we take at in our work right now is to say, one, let's understand from our partner, the teacher in this case, what is it that you figured out? Like Gayatri said, it's so intuitive sometimes. I think that first, just sitting down and trying to unpack that, what is that you figured out? Was there a question? Was there a challenge? Was there a goal you were trying to reach? So first, trying to unpack two parts to this is the context. What is the context you're working in? So what was class like? Describe your classroom to me. What do you notice about your children? How old are they? When are their moods in a different way? What are the things they learn? Right? So first, that general context of the classroom that this teacher has worked in, or the school that they've worked in, and a slightly broader context. So someone who hasn't been to the school, this teacher, for example, if she shares it with someone in another state, they get a sort of sense and feel of what it was like for this teacher. So that's what I mean by setting the context up. The second, I would say, is really trying to frame up that thing that the teacher is trying to figure out. Was there a question that led her down this inquiry about how do I make this happen? Was there a hypothesis, like in Gayatri's example, where the teacher had a hypothesis, if I do this, then the noise will come down. Or if I teach math, if I start every math lesson with something concrete in my kids' hands, and then make them go to the worksheets, they'll learn it better. So things really trying to glean out and really help the teacher or the practitioner get specific about what was it that they figured out or they were trying to figure out. And the third would be really helping the practitioner explain or deconstruct all of the different things they tried and all of the different evidences they saw. For a teacher, this is probably something she does this every day, 6 hours a day. She's constantly observing children. She's constantly trying new strategies, and everything seems like just, this is my day. You know, I do these things. So to really help a teacher say, actually, that you did, that's a strategy. That's a fantastic strategy. And that I haven't seen it happen in that class. So helping teachers and practitioners to realize that what they think are just my day, just how I do things, they're all really valuable nuggets of pedagogy. They're all really valuable nuggets of assessment, of curriculum. And that may not be the jargon we use in a school on a day-to-day basis, but gleaning that out from practitioners, I think is been so essential, because I feel like that's where the magic of the academics and the theory really come into practice, and vice versa.
Right.
Being able, you might learn a new strategy from a teacher, which then you go and look for in 10 other classrooms. So I think a lot of the role I would play with that teacher is essentially asking her to step back, helping her to deconstruct, literally just unpack everything that happened, and then make meaning of it. And I think that last stage of making meaning is where I'd probably bring in the documentation if this is the first time. Right? Make meaning of it. Maybe give the teacher a template and say, hey, everything we discussed, why don't you write it down in this format? How does that work for you? Let's play with a template. But really hand holding that process of deconstruction, specificity, meaning making, and then getting it into some packaged format. It could just be a WhatsApp message, or it could be a complete PowerPoint 30 slider, anything. But walking through the process of unpacking the thinking, I think for me is what enables practitioners to realize how much research they do every single day, and then hopefully create the time to actually systematically document more proactively, more intentionally in the next cycle over.
Yeah. Thanks, Romana. Actually, you know what, that really leads us into our next phase. I think a lot of what you said, you mentioned from a supporter lens, right? You are leading and sort of guiding the practitioner. And I think it leads me to my next scenario, where I think at SEF, for instance, a lot of what we do, of course, is in partnership with our government primary schools, and we're working with them on a day-to-day basis. Whatever we create may be wonderful, but if it's not contextual or if it's not relevant to our kids and our teachers, then there is a miss. And so I think it was what started being what started as being super effective in the way that we started doing our research in the process of creating curriculum or assessments has been a close collaboration with our practitioners on ground, because they know what's happening on ground. They know their children, they know their context. And I think that's been super helpful for us, but it was also enabled by this culture of inquiry and evidence that was set in the organization. So while we were talking about a lot around the school context right now, Gayatri, can you just give us an insight on what do you think are structures that organizations or schools can set in place to enable this partnership, where practitioners and people like us who are working in organizations wanting to improve the quality of learning for kids, experience as a teacher, what do you think what structures should be in place?
Totally. I'll just sort of take gleanings from what we actually did, and I will just try to sort of summarize them as parts of structures. Now, they are not Einsteinian, but then they were very, very effective, right? We first did just to give a context here, because structure is always towards a certain purpose. If the purpose changes, then you have to put together a new structure, right? So in our case, the purpose was we had tested out some programs for early grade children in numeracy and literacy in 4 schools. It had worked fantastically well for us. And we had decided to scale to close to 100 schools. Now, going from 4 to 100 is a huge jump, right? It was preparation for 100. We landed up working with 80 odd schools. So the question here was, what do you do? What structures do you put in place here? Because if you do not have them in place, your decision making, every manager on the field, every trainer on the field is taking decisions day in and day out, cannot wait for information to be able to answer a teacher's question there and then. If the teacher asks a question, the person cannot say, okay, let me talk to our research and development team and I'll come back to you. The person needs the answers now. So if that was the context, so what we have been doing with many programs in 3-1 is we have monitoring and evaluation as a core part of our programmatic thinking. Now, irrespective of whether we roll out a program in 2 schools or 200 schools, putting in systems and structures in place for monitoring and evaluation is core to it. Now, I'll tell you how it plays out. So if it's core to it, it's never an afterthought. So while figuring out how should a child learn math, how should a child learn English, you're also saying, okay, what data points do we need to collect? How often do we need to collect? Yeah, what are the sources through which we collect them? Right? And how often do we analyze them? And what do we glean out of it, and what on earth do we do with them? Right? So that's very much a part of the programmatic thinking itself. So therefore, monitoring and evaluation becomes the first, one of the first edifices of this structure. Then the second part is we need to have disciplined, scheduled data analysis sessions, right? Otherwise, somebody's collecting data and showing some graphs that look very beautiful, but the person on the field is doing what he or she feels like. So they do not come together. So all the work that has gone in is not leading to day-to-day decision making, and therefore not, if it doesn't inform decision making, smarter decisions may not happen as quickly as you want, right? So then what we did was we said, okay, once in 2 weeks, teams would get together and look at the data that has come out on student learning. We would look at, okay, this is what the data is telling us. We would look at data, and we would look at qualitative inputs that would have come in from the field and try to put the two together and make sense of it. It was very important for us to be very, very disciplined about getting together. This wasn't a session that was just where two people would speak. It was everybody trying to interpret in their own ways. This is what I think this data is telling me. That's what this information is telling me, right? And towards the end of the session, have a clear decision on the next steps that you want to take basis this gleaning. It's only then that your monitoring and evaluation will be considered valuable by the team members. Otherwise, it is something published somewhere. So that was the second thing that we put in as a structure, right? Then the third thing is publish a report. Even if it is internal, yeah, even if it's a 3-member team, publish a report. Yeah, it could be 4 bullet points, it could be 4 pages. The moment you're publishing something, what you're doing is you're forcing yourself to really, really drill down on the most key takeaways from what has happened on the field. So what did the teachers do? What did the children do? What learnings have happened, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the third part. And continue to use all of this data that you're gleaning from the field to inform your biggest decisions in the org. So if you do that, so imagine if you have meetings, you always bring data, bring qualitative inputs, all of them together, and then take a decision. It just sets that culture in motion, right? So the 4, just to very quickly recap, monitoring and evaluation to be a core part of the programmatic thinking. Have structured meetings where you look at data, publish the reports, and continue to use all of this for your day-to-day decision making. So these were the structures that worked for us. So that's what I would share. I will just give an example. It's never hunky-dory, right? So let me give the good news. When we looked at, we had data for around 1,500 children learning phonics, right? And we saw most of the children, 70% or 80% of the children struggling with just 2 letters of the alphabet till the end of the year. Yeah, the letters of the alphabets were A and E. Right. Now, what we have learned is, so if 70% of a large number of children tested continue to struggle, it informs the program team that can we do something at a program level? Yeah. In the first year of implementation, we did put band-aids to be able to address the problem, but now we have this data from the field, and in year 2, what we would be doing is sort of doing something at a structural level to be able to ensure that children are able to show better learning outcomes in these. So that's a positive thing, right? And then I was talking to Romana the other day about this. We all understand the importance of place value in maths when we teach early numeracy to children. We spent a lot of time getting children to master it. But when we looked at data, what we saw was a child may or may not have mastered place value concepts, but a child can still go ahead and ace mathematical operations like addition and subtraction. So there's a lot of evidence that says place value concepts are extremely important, but we are seeing that for the most important mastery goals that we had, children are able to do it without it as well. So what do we do? What decisions do we take? Now, this is not an easy answer. As an org, we are still trying to figure that out, but just as an example of just because we were structured, because we got all of the data in time and in place. And because we have those, we have some of these are the evidences. This is telling you, this is not somebody's feeling. There are 2,000 children behaving in a certain way. There are 4,000 children doing something in a different way. It informs our decision going forward. So, so those structures came in very, very useful for us in today.
Thanks, Gayatri. Is there anything you would like to add, Romana? I felt like, I think a lot of what Gayatri brought out was structure as well as a culture, right? Discipline. When you mentioned the discipline, that is, it's a reflection of culture as well. So Romana, would you like to add more on what structures you would
on the culture? I think as Gayatri was talking, the way she spoke about when we saw the data, there was no mastery of A and E. We didn't hear Gayatri say anything about failure. And I think that's so integral to a culture of research. Data is data, it's objective. Mirror to you of what's played out. And at times that also adds to the anxiety of sharing research, because we tend to want to see research around what's worked. So which objectives did get mastery? What are the resources that led to that? But actually so much learning comes from understanding, hey, something went wrong. Something didn't add up. What happened there? And I think that's also a big part of culture, just a culture that allows for inquiry and investigation. It really is a culture of curiosity. It's not a culture of what's wrong. It's a culture of let's only celebrate what's, let's only celebrate what's gone well. Yes, but let's celebrate how much we're learning. And we're learning from what works, and we're learning from what we need to rethink, what we need to redo, what we realize didn't work. So that culture of, I don't know what you'd call it, but I really think it's a culture that embraces failure, that's about curiosity, that's about inquiry. It's less binary. It's more holistic.
Yeah, thanks, Romana. I think as you're talking about that, a question just came in, a viewer who said, well, if your hypothesis is not working, and there are so many other factors that get into play, I think that gets in the way of a research where you just give hope halfway and you're just like, oh, it's not working maybe, or it's gone all over the place. What would your response be to this person?
I'd be very curious to know what's not working about it. Let's understand, where did this hypothesis not work, and maybe let's try it somewhere else. I think as organizations get bigger, as you start playing in multiple places, you can also start picking up something that worked in place A and try it out in place B, and it may not work. It may. And I think that, especially I think in the work that we do in education, where there's so much uniqueness. Every child is different. Every classroom is different. There's a lot of value in trying to understand why is it not working here? And I would add the here and the now. It's not working here and now. Why? What made it different there? So I think that itself is a research question. If your hypothesis is not working, let's understand why. And then obviously come back and reframe it, and you continue it in that cycle.
Yeah. Thanks. I think we have 5 more minutes, and I think it would just be nice to close with, we've talked about structures that need to be in place. I think, Gayatri, you've given us a very good list of what we need to have in the organization to be able to enable a culture of, enable structure, as well as, Romana, you mentioned a culture of learning and growing. I think what I would want to leave this session with is, what should an organization or a school who have not engaged in research yet, what should they do, or what should they start with in their journey of being a more evidence-backed or organization for that matter. Anyone go ahead.
Gayatri, please.
Sure, I can get us started. Everything that we spoke about in today. First is, when you say you want to be evidence-based, So a lot of us can be evidence-based, which means there is evidence and therefore we choose to roll out a program. Yeah, whether it's in the field of health or education or whatever. And we can also generate evidence. Yeah, because that's what would help many others to further build on what you have done. It's an orientation, it's a way of thinking. So if you want to be research focused, or what you say, you want to really bring evidence into your actions, it's a great place to start off with would be to have clear structures and systems. They just help you get started. You do not lose your way. Yeah, apportioning dedicated time that we spoke about. And there's only one point that I'll say: do not come under pressure of trying to prove anything to the world. You're trying to prove something to yourself first. Yeah, as a team, as an individual, you're saying, okay, I'm trying this. Let me see whether it works or not. Now, I have seen many other people try, and that's what people tell, right? And I just want to be very, very sure. So that's where you generate evidence to be very, very sure. Once you have done, you can move on to another problem. Otherwise, we'll keep grappling with the same problem. But the key thing is, as a young organization, do not try to prove yourself to the entire world or think that I have to publish a very fancy paper. If you've proven it to yourself, and many of those mini steps that you take for your organization, you work for 2 years and you'll realize the amount of beautiful evidence-based hypothesis or great information that you might be sitting on that you can choose to share with the world as it works for you.
It's lovely. What Gayatri said when she started, there's evidence, there's an evidence base, and then there's creating evidence. That itself, I think, are two great entry points. So I would say with whatever you're doing presently, make it something that's present and current. So pick up something that's either a program that's already running, or if you're about to start, then great. But otherwise, just whatever is going on right now. Maybe it's the next lesson you're going to teach. Maybe it's the program that you're going to go see, a workshop you're going to run. So I'd pick up something present. I'd pick one unit to start with. So if you're already a big established organization, it doesn't have to be everyone starting to be research driven at the same time. Pick a small group that you can begin to figure out your process with. So all of the structures that Gayatri's mentioned, maybe just pick a small team of 3 or 4 who are already excited about it, who want to try it out first, and really figure out the process that's going to work for your team. And going back to what she said, I would say bring in both of those when you're figuring out your research. I think that blend of what's the evidence base that already exists. So if I'm trying to figure out social emotional learning, there's lots of research that exists. So let me bring in some of that. And at the same time, let me do my own sort of testing and my own experimentation to figure out something here. So that, I think, would help also keep both these parts of research alive in your day-to-day practice, the building off of what already exists and the generating new. I think they need to go together. And then I would just say have fun with it, like really have fun with asking questions, gleaning data, gathering different kinds of evidence, be playful about where evidence comes from observation, from conversation, from actual assessment. So really have fun with it. So research doesn't seem like this daunting academic task, but it's part of my day-to-day. It's the way I think it, and the orientation, I believe, will get built when it's something that we lower the stakes around as well.
Thank you so much, Romana and Gayatri. I think what I'm taking away from this is just, I feel like there is structures, yes, but also this huge importance and emphasis on a culture, where we are just having a positive mindset, where we're seeing growth more than failures, and rather those failures become another question to get into, and all for the purpose of giving our children quality learning and effective learning, right? Another thing that I'm also taking away from here is that I think just being okay about what we have. There are no one's going to say that this skill that you have of making notes and expressing is wrong. Sharing it is wrong, right? But just being okay about having a brief report, sharing it to people, and who knows, there are going to be people out there who's going to find it so effective. They're not going to look at, which citation did you have and how many authors you looked at, but actually what the problem was and what the solution was, what the finding was, right? So thank you so much for this conversation, Romana and Gayatri. I hope the viewers found this effective, and it's going to lead organizations to begin their journey on being research-based in all their works and interventions.
Thanks, Anjali.
Thanks, Annie. Thanks, Gayatri.